All right, we are going live now. I'm going to start off our 16th? Yeah, 16th e-conference. We're doing real well here. So what we've got planned today is kind of a little bit of a more compact e-conference. I think we're only going to go about 90 minutes today, but we've got a couple of recurring segments. We've got two very, very interesting presentations here at the beginning, one on virtual reality, the other one on celestial cartography. And if you've never experienced John Elvert's presentation on celestial cartography before. It is one of the most well, this is coming from a historian. It's one of the most fascinating talks that I've ever heard at a planetarium conference, and so really glad that he's agreed to present that with us. That said, there is a better than 50% chance that I will disappear from this e-conference at some point. There's a line of storms across Pennsylvania, and if you've lived in eastern Pennsylvania at any point, if it starts raining, the power goes out. So if at some point I freeze and disappear, Paulette's got co-host and she'll be able to take over. So we'll still be able to do everything that we need to do today. But just so that we're kind of go through sort of the housekeeping, all of the e-conferences have been set out until I believe the end of July right now. I think the last one we have planned is July 31st. And so once we get to August, and then we have what is almost certainly going to be the following week is the IPS virtual conference, and then everything else that's going to be happening throughout the fall. Just want to make sure that we have those out through the remainder of the summer. We're going to be moving to two distinct times. There's going to be usually a noon on Wednesday every other week. In addition to that, there's going to be a 2 o'clock on Friday. So we're going to try to have a 12 sort of throughout most of the month. We're going to have one 9 a.m. on Wednesday, I think once a month, so that we can incorporate some people from overseas a little bit better, and then have a later start time on a Friday where hopefully you've kind of got everything done. You can kind of settle in on a Friday afternoon and enjoy, a couple of hours, and it makes it easier on our West Coast people. That said, all of those being prepared, all of those events being in the Dome Dialogues calendar. If any of those days work for you and you'd like to present, please let me know. We have time slots open for everything right now. And of course, we've done full sessions on topics. We've done individual papers and workshops. And one of the big things next week, we're going to have Ken Brandt for a short session on sort of how things are going for him. What's going on with the school shows and the public shows. And so if there's a way that we can get some feedback as well from all of you on what's working as you're getting back into your domes and all, that's going to be very, very useful, I think, for the community. So keep that in mind. If you're interested at all, please do contact me and let me know. And then, of course, as we move through the summer, we may, continue to add a few more segments or ideas or things that you guys would want to talk about. As always, this is an open book. Just let us know, and we'll do the best that we can. So to jump right in, got a really intriguing opening session today, and I'm not going to spend too much time introducing. I'm going to turn it over to Mark Subarow and to Sasha Kaurov of Princeton University. But this is creating planetarium-like shows in virtual reality settings. And so Mark reached out to me about a week and a half ago, asking if we could do a presentation on this, and it was, absolutely, let's do something that's this unique and this fun. So Mark, given your experience with this, and of course the work that you're doing with Sasha, I'll just turn it over to the two of you and let you introduce the project and walk us through it.
Sure. I don't really have too much to say, but for a few weeks now, we've been working with Sasha. So Sasha is a postdoc. He was in Chicago before going to Princeton, where he's at the Institute for Advanced Study. And recently he's gotten quite involved with virtual reality. There's a great website where you can see their work called omniscope.org. And he's been doing some really interesting things with the Earth Life Science Institute in Tokyo. That's an astrobiology institute. And we've just been playing around our group at Adler with Sasha as well. But I guess the motivation is that, we've all rushed to create online programs, but what actually makes our museums and our planetarium special is the built immersive environments. And is there a way to somehow capture that using some of the newer tools? So I'll hand it over to Sasha for his presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Yes, I will give a small introduction of what I'm doing and why I'm doing that. So my name is Sasha, or full name Alexander. I'm at the Institute for Advanced Study. Until recently, I was working on research only, almost exclusively on research. But in 2019, I was curious whether we can bring virtual reality into research at first. Like, can you put on your headset and explore your simulations? But quickly I realized that it will not work. Like in the next 5 years, it's not. I don't see how we can use virtual reality for research, but for outreach, I thought it can be amazing. So in 2019, we started to try to create some experiences in virtual worlds, in virtual reality first. And we started with 2 projects. I'm not going to talk about them right now, but at the beginning, we thought that it would be nice to have a game, like you put on a headset and you experience a game, an interactive game, and a single user sort of experience. And we had 2 things. One was about viruses. At that point, we knew nothing about what's coming, but the idea was that you assemble viruses from individual proteins and you learn sort of the structure of a virus, the geometrical shape of a virus, that sort of thing. And the idea was to utilize the virtual reality, the controllers in virtual reality. So this is a game where you assemble sort of a virus that looks like a soccer ball. And that was our one experience. And second experience that we were doing is Powers of 10. This quite old idea, but in virtual reality. It's same thing. You can push a button on your controller and everything shrinks or everything expands, and you can explore the galaxy. You land on the crater in Arizona. You can look at bacteria. Then you can compare a couple of objects. You can compare sort of LHC and this MU69 thing and see how they compare to each other. So that was the idea. But starting in January, like when this whole thing started to unfold, we realized that maybe the interesting part is not single user experience, but collective experiences when you can interact with other people, sort of to mimic museum or planetarium-like experience. And many companies started to move in that direction. Probably you saw that, like the Fortnite game, probably one of the most popular right now. They create special modes when you have only social interactions without violence. Facebook Horizon creating this virtual reality social network, sort of second life, and they will do it in virtual reality. It will be online sometime this year, so it's coming very soon. Also in Fortnite, they made the concert by some guy I don't know, but it was very popular and very loud in the media, that they just create an event in a game space. So the question is, if you want to create something like a museum or planetarium, what can we do? And what virtual worlds we can use for that? And since we don't have like unlimited budgets to develop something new, we need to use something that already created. And the choice is actually like great. First, you can just use games. Minecraft, Fortnite, they already implemented all you actually need. Is communication with people. You can change the world a little bit. So potentially you can create a museum or planetarium in Minecraft. But it's strange. It would look strange because there are people who like this game. There are people who don't like this game. So it's not clear how you implement it there. Then there are social networks like Second Life or VR Chat or like a few more. And this problem with social networks that, again, some people don't like social networks. You need to maintain another social network profile. it doesn't look sound good. And there are also meeting platforms like Zoom or AltSpace VR. So AltSpace VR is like, it's more like a virtual world where you have an avatar. So this was the choice, and we tried to find something that would be, so our criteria were that we need something flexible, and I think like most of the planetariums and museums will have similar criteria. We wanted something that is accessible, so it can run on any hardware, whether it's your phone or old PC, like whatever you have. We wanted to be decoupled from social media. We don't want people to force to use Facebook, for example, to experience whatever we do. We want to make it customizable. We want to have the control over it. For example, maybe at some point we want to integrate with learning management systems that people use at schools, so we can sort of track and pass credits that, for example, students experienced whatever we had and they get the credit at school, something like that. So we want to have this flexibility, and we want it to support virtual reality because it sounds like fun. And for planetariums, probably ultimately you want to have virtual reality or augmented reality when it become available in with Apple glasses or something like that. So our choice fell to Mozilla Hubs. So first of all, it's open source project run by Mozilla Foundation. So it makes it very easy to endorse. It's free and anyone can use it. It's open source. So, and in particular, this platform is provides like frictionless use to anyone because it's web driven. You just open the website and you just use it in your browser. And you can do it on your phone, on your PC, on your laptop, or in VR headset. In VR headset, you also just open the browser, follow the link, and here you are. Yes, open source, it's cheap because it's open source, you pay only for hardware. So the cost of hardware, server-side hardware is negligible. It's like few cents per hour per user. So it's just nothing. We can even, yes, we shouldn't think about that. And it supports VR. And it runs on Oculus Quest headset. So the one which doesn't require, a PC. Yeah. So here I compare web with native apps. I don't know whether audience is very interested in this technological side of the question, but in short, if we do something web-based, it's very easy to open for anyone. Just follow the link. The downside is that you have you limited in the graphics you can use. Like always, websites look worse than an app on your phone. Like apps have some animations, they look more fancy usually as a native app. So that's the main difference. But if someone is interested, I can go into this thing in more detail. So now I want to talk about our pilot. So what we did, we worked with Earth Life Science Institute at Tokyo Institute of Technology together with JAXA, and the person there who actually helped with creating this, with developing this show is Elizabeth Tasker. We created something like 30-minute show that takes place in 3 different locations. That's how it looks like. Hope you can see this video pretty well, but the idea is that first we start in a real space at ELSI in Tokyo. It's recreated in virtual world. There are people who can walk around, they can interact with the objects. There are people here who have their headsets on and they can manipulate objects with hands. There are people who are on their computer, so they just walk with their keyboard and look around with their mouse, just like any kind of video game. So now we are in this fairy tale place because this asteroid was named after this fairy tale. We can use markers to show something. And the last scene that we created is the surface of the asteroid, which is recreated from real data. You can be on that asteroid with other people, talk about like whatever you want. You can look at videos, at pictures, etc. So the functionality is very rich. You can do whatever you want. And at the end, when the lecture ends, people have some free time on the asteroid. And here people took their markers and just vandalized the surface of the asteroid. So people had fun. So that's very interesting. So what did we learn throughout this experiment is that so now we know approximately how to organize these events, what's possible, what's not possible, where we can invest more time and improve. Second is fun for students. It's indeed interactive. You can see people moving around, interacting with objects. I would say that it's much more interactive than Zoom, for example. As a lecturer, so I was presenting also these lectures as a test, just to understand how it works, even though I'm not an expert in this particular topic. So it's interesting because you get feedback from the audience. Just by looking what other people are doing, you understand whether they're interested or not. Like they can look some other ways, they can explore. Instead of listening to you, they can go away and explore a tree, for example. They're just curious to walk around and explore other objects. So there is some feedback from the students. And but on the other hand, it's pretty obvious that just transforming usual lecture to the virtual space doesn't work very well. You need to rethink how you interact with students in the virtual space, how you allocate time to different things. So there are more interesting things to explore. So what we are doing right now, as Mark mentioned, that we are trying to do something with Elvert Planetarium. Interesting question how to sell it, because ultimately you want to make it self-sustainable at least. Yes, and we are happy to collaborate. So if you want to try, if you have your own ideas, I'm happy to explore it, because currently I moved from my research career to this science communication career in the past few months. So I'm happy to try new things. Yes, so how I'm on time? Yeah, so how it looks like. I will spend 1 minute showing how easy it is to do something. So this is this Hubs, Mozilla Hubs platform that runs on my server. I can create a new room. Hope it will work, but maybe because I stream my screen, it may freeze. Okay, so live demos never work, so so if it will work, I can show you. But yeah, if anyone have questions, I'm ready to take them now. Yeah, so now, yeah, it's loaded. Essentially, I created a new room where I can invite other people. I can choose my avatar, which doesn't matter, my name, and then I enter on the screen. I will not use a microphone, just not to mess with it. And it looks for me just like a video game. If I would enter it through my headset, I would have my arms in the virtual space. And then if I want to invite other people, I can just copy the link, and I can just and I can just paste it into the chat. So anyone who has this link can follow it and enter the room immediately in your browser window. Yeah, so it's very easy to invite people, etc. So I already see that there are people who are joining the lobby. Yeah, so this room can handle like 20, 30 people. So if too many people will connect, it will crash, but 20, 30 people will work. So we already see someone entering the world. Yes, so that's what I meant by frictionless enter, that you don't need to install anything. And it seems to me that this is an important component to make it as easy as possible. Yeah, so that's actually it. I don't have anything more to say.
All right. Well, thank you, Sasha. Any questions in particular for Sasha or for Mark, or sort of how working together on putting something like this? All right. All right. Well, Sasha, thank you so much for your time this afternoon and for presenting this. So as we get updates, both Mark and Sasha, would you mind maybe coming back in the future and giving us a little bit more in depth as things grow?
Yes, of course.
Oh, Marco, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Sasha, for the presentation. I just have a question. Can you use these worlds in the browser using some more simple headsets, maybe like Google Cardboard? I think simple things like this that are for the phone, you put them inside. Can this be used for this?
Yes, so it should work with some of those headsets. I'm not completely sure which one will work, but I think it should work with Google Cardboard. There was Google Dream, but now Daydream, but now it's abandoned by Google, this project. So I don't know like what is supported right now, but it will work on something like Oculus Go, like previous generation of Oculus headsets that don't have hands when you essentially have a phone into that thing. So it will work even on this old, relatively old hardware.
Okay. Yes, because these things do not have a way of interacting. They're just for viewing.
Yes, but still, if you have a controller in your hand, you can sort of look around and walk with your controller. So a couple of people experienced this in this sort of setup. So it works.
Okay, thank you.
Sasha, we had a question, sort of a technical question of why the avatars don't have limbs. Was that something that you had mentioned, or is that a design decision?
So they don't have legs because legs are not tracked. So that's why they decided not to include legs into that thing. Actually, you can create legs. I mean, you can create your own avatars, but you don't. It's not obvious how to animate them. With hands, since everyone right now in the world don't have VR headsets, that's why they don't have hands. But if someone will enter this world in headset, then you will see hands of that person, and you will see how they move their fingers. So this whole thing works. So a lecturer is supposed to be in VR headset because that's the whole point. And then you can see how lecturer moves head, how lecturer takes objects, who waves hands, etc.
We have a question from Mary Holt. Will the hands be attached to arms?
No, they will be just hands, because like all these parts are not tracked. So essentially you have hands flying in the air.
I will say from the tests we've done, disembodied hands can be amazingly expressive, and having the hands makes a big difference. One thing we have done is, since we're all planetarium people, we've been able to port 360 video onto sort of domes, and it works quite well. So you can create a virtual planetarium, you can map your planetarium content into these environments.
Well, I can say that definitely be something we'll look forward to seeing in the future as it matures. So, so thanks to Sasha and to Mark for your time this afternoon and for that presentation. We'll turn it over next to Mr. John Elvert. This is the art and science of celestial cartography. So, John, take it away.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so in some of previous Dome Dialogue sessions, we've heard presentations on historical aspects of some figures in astronomy, as well as Mark Webb did a session on planetaria. So I thought maybe a presentation on some historical aspects of cartography and artistic ways of looking at the nighttime sky and combining the two, kind of the art and science way of looking at the nighttime sky. I've been interested in historical celestial charts or maps for a long time, and some of you might know that I collect these charts. I have a collection spanning over 4 centuries. So, you know, looking at these early charts, some of the charts obviously display and show objects and constellations and some other curious objects that are no longer in the sky today. And these charts kind of merge the art and science in a historical and astronomical interpretation of looking at the nighttime sky. And these charts are usually appreciated as works of art, but first and foremost, they're really works of science. And so before the telescope, these celestial charts were actually used to try to make sense of the nighttime sky through constellations and storytellings. They were also used to try to identify, you know, the brightness of different stars, kind of finding your way around the nighttime sky. And they also appealed to a literate public trying to learn about the nighttime sky, especially during the Renaissance. But they also told stories of the nighttime sky. And isn't that what we do too? So there, you know, this evolution of early celestial charts to what we actually use in planetariums today, or a lot of us use, and astronomers as well, trying to map the nighttime sky. I mean, we use the Salone Digital Sky Survey, you know, the Tele Survey, Digital Universe, WMAP. All these charts are actually, you know, modern day ways of looking at the nighttime sky and categorizing the universe, similar to what astronomers and mathematicians tried to do hundreds of years ago. So I'm going to try to share a screen here and see if this works. Does that work? Yes? Okay. Yeah, the art and science of celestial cartography actually is again a way of looking at the nighttime sky and looking at how the nighttime sky has been interpreted for quite a while. So I've just thought I'd share a couple of objects. Let's see if I can. Am I sharing yet? No.
We can see the initial slide.
Yeah, I can't get it to move. So what's? Huh. Try this again. All right. That's not working, is it? So we're gonna, I don't know if this is not the full screen, but we'll work what I have here, I guess. So, well, John Flamsteed is an example of what I want to emphasize here. John Flamsteed was an English astronomer in the kind of mid 18th century, rather 17th century. And he was actually the first astronomer major astronomer who used star charts and created star charts with the aid of a telescope. He was really meticulous about recording star locations and star data as far as catalogs as far as the location in the nighttime sky. But there was also a problem in what he was trying to achieve, and that was helping ships at sea determine their longitude. So ships at sea, sailors could determine their latitude, but not longitude, and ships were being lost. So he was working on these star catalogs to try to help sailors determine their longitude through the motion of the moon in relationship to the background stars, and kind of use the moon as a hand clock to determine exactly where you might be longitude-wise. Well, the King of England at the time, Charles II, learned about what Flamsteed was trying to do, and offered him to build an observatory and had him supervise the building of the Greenwich Observatory. So that was back in 1675. And that did help, in the end, help him categorize be more exact in locating stars to help sailors find their longitude. In the meantime, while he was doing this, Edmund Halley and Isaac Newton were somewhat colleagues of Flamsteed. They needed his charts to determine the motion of the moon. And for Newton, and especially, he was working on gravity at the time, and he wanted his charts for similar reasons that Edmund Halley wanted them. And they convinced Flamsteed to have his data on the moon and gravity published. Well, so Flamsteed agreed, said, okay, go ahead and publish those sections of the moon and positions of certain stars. They went out and published his entire catalog, all his star charts, all his data that he had accumulated for the last 20, 25 years, and published 400 volumes of it. And when Flamsteed found out that they had published all of his work, he was livid. He really upset does not do grace for what he was actually feeling at the time. So he got really upset, collected 300 of the 400 volumes, put them in the backyard in a pile, and set them all on fire. So there was only about 100 volumes that remained. That ruined the friendship of, obviously, Edmund Halley and Isaac Newton. But Flamsteed did eventually publish his works. He didn't publish any of his works during his lifetime. He died in 1719, but his wife published an atlas called the Coelestis, which contained not only a lot of his data on stars and motions and positions of the moon, but also his celestial charts. And this is what I was interested in mainly. So this is a page section of his charts. We have Orion and Taurus there. And some of these stars are interesting to take a second look at, because some of them don't really turn out to be stars. And there's one star in particular in his chart. I've circled it here. This is 34 Tauri. He actually saw this in his telescope, and he recorded this star in 1690. So I wanted to look at the star and see what he was looking at back in 1690, because it's obviously not a star on star charts today. And I used the virtual planetarium software Stellarium and went back to the year 1690 and put in some figures or some numbers. So this is what Stellarium came up with. And down in the lower left, you see London. where the Greenwich Observatory obviously is, and over there on the right, the 1690, number 12 for December. That's when he made this observation. And lo and behold, Uranus is right where that star is that he logged as 34 Tauri. So there's the star on his charts, and Uranus is right there. Obviously, William Herschel discovered the planet much later in 1841, but it was not in Taurus. The discovery that Herschel made was in the constellation of Gemini. So that's one of the interesting things. Next time you're in Rome, you can go to Flamsteed's Atlas Coelesti restaurant. And this is interior shot. They've got planets hanging from the ceiling, and they serve pizza and good beer. Another interesting chart and non-existent star is one of Cepheus and Cassiopeia. Right between the two, there's a star in his charts that doesn't really exist today. It is the star Cassiopeia 3. And a closer look at that star, maybe trying to find out what he saw using stellarium again, going back to 1680 this time. This is when he made this observation with a telescope. Stellarium, however, doesn't show any object, doesn't show a star there at all. I used a red arrow to point exactly, or as close as I could, to where that star that he put it on his star chart is. And there's nothing there. So what did Flamsteed see way back then? Well, we know today that this object was a supernova. And if you use the explosion wave, I guess, and work that, or the expansion wave, work that back in time to the time of the explosion of the supernova, it comes up to about 1680, but not exact. This object was visible in the night sky from Earth, but not probably in the year of 1680. So it's still a little of a question mark if Flamsteed really saw the supernova in 1680, or really what he was looking for or looking at. But this is the object that was, or is, in that area that he was looking at. And I think it's still the strongest radio source in the nighttime sky today. Another astronomer, French astronomer, Alain Manasson-Millet, also produced a prolific kind of encyclopedic description of the known world, as he called it, but everything back then was the known universe, and that was in 1683. And he had a section, a volume on celestial objects and cosmology at the time, all the systems, cosmological systems that were I guess in vogue. And I had a lot of interesting images and objects that today are not there. This is a page called Étoiles Nouvelles, new stars, and 5 of these objects are actually novas. In the upper left, you see Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia's nova there is the 1572 nova that Tycho Brahe observed. But I was more interested in the Andromeda supernova. He's got it listed there. I circled it, the E there. I circled it. That's not a nova, and of course, we all know that today that is the Andromeda Nebula, M31. So some of these star charts, and not just these 2 early astronomers, but there are several early astronomers that located objects in the sky that are not what they seem to be, or different than today than what they were back then. So you kind of use some detective work to have some fun and look at what earlier astronomers saw. In fact, Millet also used his charts to actually try to spread and popularize astronomy. All his charts contained kind of scenes that that the common person could relate to, kind of rural scenes. So, you know, a lot of his charts, like we see here, have day-to-day figures and day-to-day life, so people could relate to his celestial charts. So he's got just again dozens and dozens of these charts that you can relate to, or have the people at the time try to relate to and learn something about astronomy as well. So in the classroom setting, or even in the planetarium, I've tried to use these charts to get students to relate to the science-art connection. And you can go online and get facsimiles of these charts really easily. And you can also try to enhance the students' appreciation of the perspective and how earlier people saw the universe. I think we've all done that sometimes when we try to tell stories about the nighttime sky. But I've also used this in public community settings where you try to get citizen science research. And what I've done sometimes is try to have people pour through these earlier charts and that have been mislabeled objects. And also teachers have used these charts to encourage students to create their own stories of the nighttime sky and kind of color them in as well. But another interesting thing I think about the early celestial charts are the constellations or objects that are no longer there in current celestial charts. So we have 88 known constellations today, and earlier astronomers and cartographers would put up constellations or make up constellations in their charts, and there was no limit. I mean, who was to say you couldn't put a constellation up in the sky to honor a patron, or use a national symbol, or just you use the reason a celestial event of some sort to create a constellation. So up until about the early 1900s, you actually had star charts showing well over 100 constellations in the sky. And in 1928, the IAU said enough is enough. I think that was in Holland at the time. At their meeting, that they said there's going to be 88 constellations, and that's what we have today. But we're looking at the southern sky of John Flamsteed again, and we see the Argo Navis ship over down there to the lower right. That is probably the most well-known constellation that was broken up by a French astronomer. I think it was in 1841. But so we have three constellations that used to be one constellation. We have Carina, the keel there, and Vela, the sails, and Puppis, the stern. So that's one constellation. There's another constellation right next to it, the Charles the Oak. And actually that's Charles II the Oak. Flamsteed was indebted to King Charles and put the constellation up in the sky. And there's a little hollow there in the trunk of the tree. And supposedly that's where King Charles hid from his enemies, the French. And Flamsteed put that up in the sky as well. Hevelius was another really cool guy. He was a predecessor of Flamsteed. But I wanted to show this only because you don't see a lot of constellations in the sky. But you see Navis, Argo, Jason and the Argonauts use that ship. And here's another close-up just to show you the different artistic styles of different periods of time and how constellations were representative. Another guy, this is Cellarius, Andreas Cellarius, and he's a Dutch cartographer, artist, back in 1616. These are all original maps that I have, but again, his interpretation of the Argus, interesting and different. And right below, we see another obsolete constellation that's Gallus, the rooster. Yeah, I think it's the rooster. And even an earlier print, going back to 1550-ish, Argo is there. We see Orion in a flamboyant tunic, and all these interesting different ways of looking at the nighttime sky, and from a historical point of view as well. And the southern sky is not really populated with constellations because the southern sky wasn't really explored by astronomers actually until about 150 years later after this print was made. And in 1822, you have the epitome of a crowded sky. This is Alexandra Jamison, who populated the nighttime sky with a lot of bizarre constellations. Over there to the left, you see a hot air balloon, and over there to the right, Nocturna, the owl. The owl used to be Tertus, the flightless bird, I think from Australia. And over there, down to the left, there's a printing press. So just you know, a lot of different ways to look at the nighttime sky and different ways to interpret the nighttime sky that I find interesting from a historical aspect of teaching astronomy. So that's my take on astronomical and celestial cartography. So thanks for the time.
Absolutely. All right. Any questions for John? There's a lot of good feedback for you to go back and read in the chat. But any particular questions before we move on? All right. Well, you know where to find John. So if you got any questions after this, feel free to reach out to him. And John, if we could we get the some of those slides for the Dome Dialogues online? Just be able to look through that, because it's some pretty good stuff. Great. All right. Well, thanks again, John. Now we'll move on to our recurring segments of the week. And so all the way across the ocean, everybody, it's your favorite time of the week. It's Long German Words of the Week with Anna Green.
Every week. Just keep talking when I'm not unmuted. Okay, so welcome to Long German Words of the Week, where I give you long German words and you guess what they mean. So without further ado, word number 1, please, Michael.
Here we go.
So, die Raumfahrtbehörde. Die Raumfahrtbehörde. Is that the Space Lab and the ESA-made Columbus module of the ISS, or is that a space agency?
We are neck and neck here. See, it's all the witty banter that we do in this segment that just prepared us for the live stream, I think. Way to go. All right, so we've got almost everybody in. Looks like it's about half and half, but if there's a lean, it's towards the lab in the ESA-made Columbus module of the ISS. The other roughly half of us say space agency. What is our correct answer?
So Raumfahrt is space. More specifically, it's used when talking about like launching people into space for exploration and study. Behörde is often found on the end of many words. For example, I used to have to go to the Ausländerbehörde every time I needed to renew my visa. So the Behörde can be an office or an agency. So that is a space agency.
Okay, excellent, excellent. All right, we're ready for word number 2.
Yep. Der Weltschmerz. Der Weltschmerz. So is that a deep sadness about life arising from the acute awareness of evil and suffering in the world? Or is it a traditional dish in parts of Germany where sausage is served with bread that is covered in lard or fat?
Well, this is certainly not the first time I've said it, but I hope it's the sausage.
Sorry.
I hope it's the sausage. Mark Webb asks if both of those can be the same. I think they're really two sides of the same coin, to be honest. If you're going to cover something in lard, then yeah, you have an acute awareness of something. Diabetes, heart disease. All right, so this is overwhelmingly in favor of a deep sadness about life arising from the acute awareness of evil and suffering in the world. So Anna, what is the correct answer?
That is the correct answer. Sorry, Michael. So yes, the Germans have this one wasn't such a long word of the week. It's a rather succinct word to describe a complex feeling. Now, I will say that a dish here that is bread covered in lard is popular in parts of Germany. I thankfully have not yet seen it in Berlin. I learned my lesson the hard way when I did my study abroad in Austria, and I went for something on the menu that I didn't know. I just knew the word bread, and I went, I like bread. And I asked them what was on it, and they said, I don't know how to describe it to you, but I like it. And I went, good enough for me. And it was 100% Schmalzbrot, which is lard bread.
Lard.
So I know people who say it is wonderful. I scraped all the lard off and just ate the bread plain.
Okay. So there's your deep sadness about the awareness of evil and suffering. And now word 3, here we go.
Die Vergangenheitsbewältigung. Die Vergangenheitsbewältigung. Is that the process of confronting or coming to terms with the past, or is it a feeling of longing and nostalgia for one's childhood?
You really went for the heartstrings this week.
It seemed a little on point when I was looking for news articles to pull words from.
Agreed. Just the concentration in everyone's faces. It's just so fun to watch. Longing and nostalgia for one's childhood. Okay. I'm not putting it on, just, looking it over and seeing what the Germans are feeling today. All right, so we're about 90% in, still about half and half, literally half and half at this point, between the process of confronting or coming to terms with your past, or that feeling of longing and nostalgia for your childhood. Anna, what is the correct answer?
So Vergangenheit is the past. So this is the process of confronting or coming to terms with the past, often used in a not so pleasant thing that you have to come to terms with. So, and Patty, I love what you wrote in the chat. I could just listen to the words and not care ever what they actually mean. That is my life, depending on the meeting I'm in or where I am and what I am doing. Depends on what percentage I understand of what's being said. I try really fast to, if I think I've caught the word, I try really fast to look it up in the dictionary on my phone and make a note of it so I can learn it. But that is the one nice thing about German. It's spelled exactly how it sounds. So typically you can grab it. That was a lot harder to do with French when I was learning French because they don't always say half the word. So
40% of the letters are just a breath.
Yeah, and I picked the two languages to learn the most. That one, there's words where there's like 5 vowels in a row, and that would be French. And then there's German where you can have just a string of consonants in the row with no vowels. Or my favorite, when you have 3 of the exact same consonant in a row, like the word Spattuppe, which is mockingjay from Hunger Games. So there's 3 T's in that word all in a row.
So Mike Francis says that we should try Finnish. Mike, would you be willing to do a long Finnish words? No, he would not. Okay. All right. At some point, Anna will just kind of get into like more and more specific types of German words. And then, hey, if we ever have another IPS in Germany, can you give us the dirty German words of the week?
So for one, there's never been an IPS in Germany yet.
Really?
Yeah, really. And 2, I will tell you what my French teacher told me in high school when we would ask her to teach us slang and dirty words. And that was, when you have successfully passed AP French, I will let you look at the slang dictionary I have in my classroom and you can make as many notes as you want, which I took her up on. So when you all take AP German, I will publicly here give you the words that you're hoping for, but if you come see me in person, I can probably share some fun ditties with you.
So you heard it here first. You're saying there's a chance.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
great. Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Patty that one of the great things about German is how it sounds. And I wanted to ask Anna if she has a very, very long word there to read aloud to us.
Yeah, if you give me a minute, I can look one up and give it a try without rehearsing it. In the meantime, say thank you, Mark. My media setup is thanks to the Canon, just gonna put this out there, Michael and I both use the Canon webcam app, so it turns our DSLRs into webcams, which is so much better than anything that comes on laptops, especially really old ones like my personal laptop that I'm just hoping it makes it through the end of the year this year. So
you were looking and sounding pristine today.
Thank you. Yeah, once I tried this, I was never able to go back to the actual built-in webcam because it was just blurry, even for me.
And just remember, our longest word as of this week, the longest word we've had is 63 letters. So, I mean, that's a paragraph in like 3rd grade. It's a lot.
Yeah, definitely is. All right, let's see. I have some like super duper long ones that I'm saving for the last time we do this session. But let's see. Oh, this one's a fun one. Let's see. Oh, this is tiny print. I make things really big on my work laptop when I read them to you because my eyes are terrible. So you're gonna see just how terrible it is. I hold this closer. Okay. Zollfahndungsneuerregelungsgesetz. I may have already done that one. Zollfahndungsneuerregelungsgesetz. So that is the Customs Investigation Act. So we're coming up on tax season here. So now that my American taxes have been filed, I get to file my German taxes. And just long words out the wazoo. I'm very grateful that I have someone in my life who can help me through the tax software because it is in German. And there's just, even with, Google Translate, which is not great, but it's better than nothing. I still question that I would fill them out correctly. So, and then you get letters from the tax office, and then you are still waiting 9 months later to hear a resolution on things. And so good times.
There you go. Tax season. Robin Bird, are you laughing as to what happened in the background? Okay. So for those of you who may have seen it, Ben somehow ran into the kitchen and took an entire bottle of apple juice with him. So it's just going to be one of those afternoons here at the McConville house. So Anna, as always, thank you for the long German words of the week. we'll have more next week. And yeah, so we do have a final day. We do have a final set of words. So we're excited about that. We're going to lead that up to the greatest of all of the long German words of the week.
Thank you all for
up,
playing as always.
Next up is Mr. Geoff Holt with Astronomy Apps for your at-home audiences. Geoff, take it away.
All right. I want to announce first, though, that for the first time ever, I got 3 out of 3. No crushing me this time. So I don't know if that bodes well for my sharing of the app, because usually I'm, going 0 of 3 and coming out of that. So I want to give credit to Paige Else for her recommendation for this week's app. It's an app that I had the previous version of, but this new app has an offer right now that you can actually help astronomers with borders with. So the app is called Orbitrek, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. It is available iOS and Android for the same price. And so if you saw in the chat, until June 7th, half of the proceeds will go to Astronomers Without Borders. And if this interface looks kind of similar, it's made by the same developers that originally made Sky Safari. Sky Safari, I found out, was bought up by the Simulation Curriculum Corporation, which brings us not only Sky Safari now, but things like Starry Night. And then I'm going to just kind of run through the interface here. It's an app that does kind of the same thing that Sky Safari does, where it can show where the satellites are up in the sky. So if you want to identify what satellite you're seeing as it's passing over, it has this sky view. And so that's what we are seeing, is this sky view over here. And it has the functions. If you tap the motion button, then as you move the mobile device around, aim it at different parts of the sky, it does show you what you're seeing in that part of the sky. And if you click now, it would be a little bit more useful. Also, if I turn off the time interface, there is a little camera button there. And if you tap that camera button, then it has the augmented reality kind of data overlaid with your camera view. I can't really show you that because it only works on things that are dark. And so all I would show you is my ineffective lighting situation here, lighting up my walls. So then you can grab control over it and just pan around to look at different parts of the sky. If I bring up that time mode again, we can set it for right now. And you'll see that some of the satellites are actually moving across the sky. You can pause the time. So that's the sky mode. That makes sense. If you go into orbit mode, so I'm going to tap this orbit button here now. Now it's showing satellites in orbit. And you can see the You Are Here button for my location. This is showing all the satellites that I have turned on in the settings right now, which is pretty much the settings right out of the box. Because I had not, until Paige gave me this recommendation, I had the old version. So I just recently downloaded and paid for the new version. I like it. The orbit view here, if you had a satellite that you had been investigating, it would center on that satellite. So if you had just done a search for ISS or something, then it would also show you that satellite centered first. In the satellite view, I tap on that, it'll go to whatever satellite you have searched for or selected most recently. And so this is the Crew Dragon. You can see that it's not connected to the ISS, but I think that's mostly just a limitation of the fact that they can't keep updating the models to say what's attached to the ISS right now and what is not. But it is showing the proper location for the space station. If I tap on ground, that'll show the ground view of where the Crew Dragon is, which would also be where the ISS is. And you can zoom in and out, slew around whatever you need to do for that ground view. So these are functions that you would not get in like Sky Safari. The motion button there is the next one over, and really that's only helpful when you have it in Sky View. So I don't understand why they don't have the motion button over by Sky View, but I suppose these are the main buttons here, the main functions, the main views. And so I guess these are just getting into kind of some of the other option buttons. Center, of course, would just center whatever satellite you are investigating. Search brings up this list. You can, up here, this is how I found the Crew Dragon, was just to type in the word crew. You can tap on tonight's satellites, and it'll just show you which satellites will be passing overhead at your location. And newly launched does include the Crew Dragon Demo 2, interestingly named Endeavor. Thought maybe they could come up with something a little more original. Not necessarily the opinion of my employer. You've got lots of other options for different categories, weather satellites, disaster monitoring, communication satellites, GPS satellites. So all of these are the different categories that you can turn on or turn off in the settings. Info will just give you information about whatever you have selected. So here's orbital element, kind of basic information for the Crew Dragon. Then in the settings, the next button over, you can either set it for your own location, just using your mobile device's GPS readout, or you can change your location by typing in a different latitude or longitude, or doing a search for different cities. Out of the box, all of the satellite groups are selected except for geostationary, but you can add in geostationary here if you wanted by just tapping geostationary and checking or unchecking the box. I also turned off sound effects because I don't feel like I need space music in the background as I'm using the app. And I do just fine without audio feedback when I'm tapping buttons. And then each of the views have different things that you can turn on and off. So you could turn off the constellations, for example, if you wanted. Same for the other settings, just a way to kind of toggle on and off and kind of customize what you're seeing in each view. So I think that's about it. If you're going to get this app, now would be a good time to get it in order to support the work of Astronomers Without Borders. Unless there are any questions, we'll move on to the next segment.
Yeah, if anything, now looking good, Geoff. I think everybody, people playing along as you're actually giving the presentation, so that worked out very, very well. Awesome. Well, thank you, Geoff, as always. And so our last of the recurring segments today, let's throw to the closer. Let's go to the record shop with Mike Smail.
Hey, thanks, Michael. Hey, everybody, thanks for sticking around. You probably know the drill by now. This week you get a bonus record. We got 4 records we're going to talk about, share information in the chat as we go, and then do sort of a recap at the end. All right, first record we've got this week is a record called 28th and Stonewall. It's by Tim Berry. Tim Berry is from Richmond, Virginia. He headed up a punk band in the 90s and the 2000s called Avail, and he's written a number, and for the better part of the last decade, 15 years, he's been doing kind of a singer-songwriter thing with a lot of acoustic tracks. There's a particular song on this record I'd like to highlight. It's called Prosser's Gabriel, and this tells the story of Gabriel, who was a slave on a plantation just outside of Richmond, Virginia, in the late 1700s. Gabriel led an attempted slave uprising, which turned out it was foiled by bad weather and a couple of traders' companions. He was hung in Richmond in 1800, and the place where he was hung, the place where he was buried, up until very recently was basically a parking lot next to I-95, next to the interstate there in Richmond. And this song is basically bringing attention to that, calling that to light, pointing out what a terrible situation that is. And since then, there have been some baby steps. The city of Richmond bought out the parking lot and kind of put down grass, put up a couple small text panels, kind of acknowledging the shameful past of that part of the history of the city. He received a posthumous pardon from the governor, 10, 15 years ago. But it speaks a lot. It's kind of the smallest of baby steps. When Richmond is a city, who was the capital of the Confederacy, 2 miles away up the street, has these huge statues, these monuments, the Civil War general or Confederate generals, Confederate politicians, who still stand, who are still up there, and it really kind of speaks to the priorities of that city. So you'll find a lot of recurring themes about Richmond, about the city, not just in 28th and Stonewall, but in all of Tim Berry's solo releases. Also in the Avail full band releases, if you like something a little bit louder, a little bit angrier. Speaking of louder and angrier, our second record for the day is Rage Against the Machine's 7-inch single, "The Ghost of Tom Joad." This is a cover of a Bruce Springsteen track, which you may be familiar with, talking a little bit about Tom Joad, the character from The Grapes of Wrath, but also his basically stances on kind of lifting up the working people, looking for those instances of police brutality and people being taken to task for who they are in their life situations, and opposition to that. The artwork itself is by a guy named Eric Drucker. It's a crop of a larger piece. Eric Drucker now mostly does New Yorker covers. Strangely enough, that may be where you've seen some of his work. But again, you might not be remiss in thinking this wasn't drawn 24 years ago, but this was drawn maybe sometime in the last day or two. Trying to find that, you might be able to find it on the secondary market. It was kind of a promotional release. Didn't get too much wide distribution. Yeah, I see, Justin. The statues certainly got a lot more colorful, which is hopefully the start of some more changes to come there in Richmond. All right, third record for today is by Lee Baines III and the Glory Fires. They're out of Birmingham, Alabama. This is called Youth Detention. Nail My Feet Down to the South Side of Town. And Lee Baines and the band are very active. Having not been raised, but having spent some time, having lived in the southern U.S., the southern U.S. is a wildly complicated place, but with an incredibly bad history, a terrible history of racial oppression and black subjugation and white supremacy. And I get a little bit of hope because this band brings a lot of voice to those issues, speaks out very strongly against them, in favor of anybody who's ever been discriminated against for any reason, the negative repercussions of that. This really good example. We're talking about statues. This record came out a couple years ago. One of the songs on it is called "I Can Change." And it's all about a Confederate obelisk there in Birmingham, Alabama. And as of 2 days ago, this statue was pulled down. It's not there anymore. So it had stood for over 100 years. Birmingham as a city is 70% African-American, 70% Black. And they had this symbol of oppression and slavery lording over them for over a century. And it's finally gone. The Levine's 3 records, the earlier records, Bomb and Gilead and Dereconstructed, have a little bit more of a country twang to them. Youth Detention, Nail My Feet Down to the South Side of Town. Like I said, it's kind of that love letter to growing up in Birmingham and all the good people who are working to bring change and put down those past systems and legacies of oppression. There's also a record called Live at the Nick, which was a live record that they recorded. It was just released in the last year. It has a lot of the same songs from Youth Detention on it. But I will say, just from a weird technical recording standpoint, one of my gripes about their studio albums is they always really buried the vocals down in the mix, which made it pretty hard to tell exactly what you were hearing. The live record doesn't have that problem at all. Lee's voice cuts through real nicely. All right, last but not least, 4th record for today. This is the autobiography by Vic Mensa. Vic is a Chicago rapper. Grew up on the south side of the city. He's part of the Save Money Collective. Most famous member of that, some of you may have actually heard of, is Chance the Rapper, Chancellor Bennett, Nico Segal, Tokyo, a couple other members there. This is Vic's last full-length record. The autobiography was put out on Jay-Z's record label, Rock Nation. And it's basically a story of his life, sort of growing up on the south side of Chicago and the difficulties, and again, the racism, the police oppression, the brutality that the African-American Black community in Chicago and all over the country has to deal with on a regular basis. Before, Vic has always been very, very outspoken towards social issues. And the digital EP, which he released right before this full length, was called There's a Lot Going On. And that's, again, if you want to listen to something to really get you riled up, that's a good option. It's got a track directly inspired and about the murder of Laquan McDonald by Chicago police officers, the ensuing cover-up and all the bullshit that went along with that. But again, the autobiography is the latest full length. There's some digital singles and EPs and stuff that you can get from the link there. So that is our 4 for today. Again, the quick hit: Tim Berry, 28th and Stonewall. The link to his store and then to his website. Rage Against the Machine, The Ghost of Tom Joad, the Springsteen cover. Lee Baines 3 and the Gloryfires, and then Vic Mensa, the autobiography. I mentioned it, I think last week or the week before, but this Friday, Bandcamp will again be foregoing their 15% share on any music purchased through their website. So anything you buy from them, 100% of that's going to go to the artist, and that'll be this Friday, which is again a cause I definitely recommend supporting. So yeah, that's what I got. That's the record shop for this week, and we'll see you next time.
Now I can hear myself. That was on mute. Yeah, it was on the wrong mute. Thanks, Mike. You're fighting the power this week in a big way. So with that said, we've got some time now for open forum. If anybody's got anything they'd like to bring up, kind of, for the good of the order for the next week, please feel free to do so. We'll open the floor. Anybody for open forum? Mark Webb.
Okay, well, as always, tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Central, 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, virtual hospitality suite. Drop in and say hi. We're gonna just kind of have a general conversation tomorrow. It's been sort of a stressful week for everyone, so let's kind of just decompress a little bit. So hope to see you there.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right, anyone else for open forum? Paulette, maybe?
Yeah, I can't figure out how to raise my hand if I'm a host. So thank you to those of you that participated in our sort of test run of our virtual field trips, the Contemplating Constellations lesson. If anybody has any questions or any input for those, we're happy to take that input. And I just thank you, everybody. Oh boy. And somebody must be right outside my door. Again, please give us any input or any information that you think might be good for us to change or do differently.
Great, thanks, Paulette. And just some updates. Michelle, of course, has put in the Zoom chat the link for WAC at the end of July, 2-day e-conference. And so, Michelle, if you're able to speak real quick, when is the last day for paper submissions for WAC this year?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
The 13th of June is when we would like to have the abstracts in.
Great, great. Of course, if you're interested, you can click on the link, June 13th for abstracts for WAC. And then, of course, we have LIPS in the middle of July. I think it's the 13th, 14th, and 15th, or the 12th, 13th, and 14th. We'll, of course, have those dates as we get closer. So we'll do a little bit of work on that. And then anybody else? Oh, yeah. If you do have woodchuck at home tonight, you should probably bring one bottle to the hospitality suite, as this would have been SEPA 2020 down in Fort Pierce. So if you want to let the East Coast of Florida good times roll, then bring some woodchuck tonight to not tonight, tomorrow night. What day is it? To hospitality and enjoy sort of a virtual SEPA with Ken Brandt and the SEPA crew. Anyone else? Bring it both nights. Patty, bless you. She knows, she gets it. Anyone else? Great. And so the update, no power outage, and the juice is still intact. So very, very good. And so with that, get to unmute everybody. Have a great rest of the week. We'll see you at hospitality. And if not, we'll see you next week for the next e-conferences.
All right. See you guys later.
Well, have a nice day, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Reggie says she's sorry.
Bye-bye.
Oh, it's a cute puppy. Kiss it.
Thanks, everybody.
It's done.